So what we'd like to do now is have students reflect a bit and talk about their experience, specifically how you grew as an individual, what you learned about yourself, what you learned about other people, or your craft as it pertains to some of the stories that you worked on. You can look at the website to see details of stories and images, but we want people to talk more about the personal experience, because travel and having experiential learning opportunities is not just a part of becoming a better storyteller, but it's about learning more about yourself. And so I'd like you guys to reflect a bit about that from the personal connection. Lana, if we could start with you. This question was, why did we go to Zimbabwe? Why did we look at animal conservation? There was an actual connection and reason. And Lana worked on a story that would explain that. So if you could talk about your first story.
Yes. My name is Lana Ferguson. I'm a junior journalism major here. And my story was on Rob Waters. It was a profile on him, and he works with Mbelo Safaris, where we stayed. And their safaris are very photograph based and like taking people out and like looking at the wildlife and everything. And I learned a lot from Rob. Is this working? I don't know. I'm loud anyways. But Rob actually was a journalism student here. He's a Zimbabwean native, but after he graduated with a degree in English in Zimbabwe, he decided to send out a bunch of letters all across the world, and Ole Miss was the first one to respond, so that's where he went. And it's kind of interesting because journalism isn't really a thing in Zimbabwe. They don't have the First Amendment like we do, so I learned a lot about the differences in how I have a new appreciation for journalism here in America and all the rights we have. But he grew up. His mom was very into birds, so they'd like bird books. He always had one with him when we were going on our tours and everything. And so his first job once he got back from Mississippi was a safari guide. And he is just something like a lot of people there were passionate about, and they're passionate about their country and the animals there and making sure that poachers aren't coming in and all the negative effects of that. So we learned a lot about that, and I learned a lot about how the world views Mississippi too through that lens. He talked about how the struggles of race that Zimbabwe has faced. They were Rhodesia, and then in only a few years, like less than a decade before he came to Mississippi in the 80s, they turned to Zimbabwe. And he kind of told me about how it wasn't as shocking, like the racial tensions here weren't as shocking to him because of where he came from. And it was just really interesting to see that, like, it's a big world. Zimbabwe's really far away, but he found connections in our small state and even city that were in Zimbabwe, his native country. So,
thank you. Thank you. So we're going to jump now to Shalise Benson, and if you can talk about what are some of the similarities or differences that you saw in Zimbabwe. And one major start was at the first place we visited. If you could also talk about that, because you don't find that just anywhere.
Yeah, I'm Shalise. Hi. Okay. The first place that we visited was Victoria Falls, and it's actually one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was very just amazing to be there, I suppose, because like she said, we don't really see that. It's like, I don't know how to put it. It's like Niagara Falls times 1,000. It's really beautiful. It has 15 like viewpoints. 15? Yeah, 15 viewpoints, and it starts off really like simple with just the Zambezi River, and then once you get to the 15th point, or 14th point rather, it's like the falls are just like coming down so hard you can't see anything. And then you get to the 15th point, and there's this beautiful bridge that links Zimbabwe to Zambia. And then there's this beautiful rainbow at the end, and it's just kind of like, I don't know, like life is kind of like that. Like it kind of starts off real simple, and then you have these really like rocky and hard situations that you can't get through, but always at the end there's like this rainbow. So being there was really, really cool, and it was beautiful, and it was eye-opening, and I wrote a story on it. It's on the website if you guys want to go and check that out.
Thank you. And within the first few days of the trip, a few students came to me and said, "What's going on?" There's something that we noticed that's very similar from where we are in the U.S. and here in Zimbabwe. And Lana touched on that. But when I spoke with the students, I said, well, there's this word called colonialism, and it touched all over the world. And so a lot of students had observed pretty quickly what colonialism meant in Zimbabwe and saw remnants of it still today. So, Shalise, do you mind just saying or sharing what it was at the very first lodge that you noticed?
Yeah, at the very first lodge, and I think Ariel can kind of back me up on this, we noticed that definitely in the beginning, the workers and the servers were all Black people. And we were just kind of like, oh, wow, like you see people here and everybody's just of different races and different backgrounds and everything. And Ariel and I just kind of noticed that happened, and it was just an eye-opening experience for us.
Yeah, and it was something that they didn't expect. And Lindy, we talked about it, and Ariel, and just how colonialism is a global practice that took place, and there are still remnants of that. And so it was interesting to see how quickly they picked up on it, because it is a part of Zimbabwean culture. All right, so let's shift now over to Lindy. If you can talk about specifically wildlife conservation, we saw spectrums of it. So we were in Zimbabwe as well as Namibia, and there are different practices with respect to wildlife conservation. So if you could share that with us. And for you, what did you learn about yourself or the practice of that?
Well, I think to start with, I had no idea what a safari really was and what it involved. It's kind of like a trip to the zoo, except you kind of go in the enclosure a little bit, but it's not. There are two different types. There are photographic safaris, and they take place like within nature preserves, so animals can kind of roam around and you're just kind of, in there. And then there are ones where hunting safaris where people pay what's called for a trophy hunt, where they pay a certain amount for a tag and they go there for a specific animal. They shoot the animal, and it's called a trophy hunt. So we kind of learned about different aspects of that, and I think they're both really kind of they play very important roles in each of those economies, I guess you would say. And you have these entire industries built up around it. What was really interesting to me is when I think of the word conservation, I think of saving animals and always making sure that all the animals are alive and well and living happy. But it was more of like an equilibrium type situation where if you didn't control certain aspects of populations, it was detrimental to all of the other animals, including them. Like if you don't have certain, doorstops to one animal's population, not only will they overpopulate and eat the other animal's food that lives in their environment, but they could also help depopulate their own, species. So it was kind of eye-opening because, living here, we have these really ingrained ideas of how people should live here, but also in other countries. And America, I think, is very influential in how those policies are made. And we oftentimes fail to realize how our decisions and legislation affects people in other countries. And so I think it was really kind of, it just kind of blew my mind how impactful that those could have been.
And something else with conservation, in talking to some people there, the African Zimbabwean way of conserving wildlife is that the last names, the surnames in Zimbabwe are all an animal. So in their language, some people's last name is bird, some is zebra, some is elephant. And so if your last name, whatever your last name is, you do not eat, kill, or touch that animal. And that allows there to be a natural conservation process that allows there to be balance and harmony in the wild. And I had never heard of that. And I thought it was fascinating just meeting people and saying, what's your last name? And then what animal is that? So we have a long list of last names simply in the heritage of making sure that there was natural wildlife conservation. Thank you. All right, so now let's move to Josie. Josie is not new to any of this. She was our expert. Her family was tremendous in making this possible, this trip. And so, Josie, if you can talk a little bit about being from a hunting, global travel family, what this experience was like and what actually was new for you.
Okay, like Miss Mickey said, I'm Josie Slaughter. I'm a sophomore IMC major, and this trip was awesome, first off. Getting to be with these amazing people was so much fun, and the amount of laughter and learning that we had was just unbelievable. I mean, just the best time. And also, like she said, I have grown up in a hunting background. That's more or less what my parents do, and so I have always grown up in a very pro-hunting life and in a pro-hunting thinking. And so to go on this trip and to kind of take that lens away and to try to look at it more objectively was very new for me. And to not have my parents there, explaining what was going on or anything, like I had to think through and process for my own what I believed and what I heard as we went along. And people interviewed different natives or people working at these lodges that we went to that were mostly photo safari lodges. And that was very new for me, and I absolutely loved it. It was so great. I loved getting to put on my own lens and to back up a lot of my beliefs and to learn from talking to other people who live over in Africa about their opinions, both who work at hunting safaris and photo safaris, and to hear their opinions. A lot of them backed up what I believe. A lot of them kind of questioned what I thought, and so I really enjoyed that and loved getting this new perspective of not having just a solely hunting role. And I've been to national parks over there, so I've been in that situation, but this was a majority in national parks. And so it was really neat for me to be there and to be shooting animals with a lens instead of a gun. And I loved that. Absolutely. It was so beautiful and so much fun getting to watch all of them experience Africa. It's so near and dear to my heart. That's where I feel at home. And so it was awesome to get to watch them experience that, and I absolutely loved it and learned so much about photography and about taking a masterful picture. And I was very new to that, was not very good at that. But I think I learned so much from Ms. Mickey and from the students and seeing their amazing photographs that they took. It was really wonderful for me to get to learn from them, learn from my own mistakes and my successes, and to now be at a point where I can take a decent photo. Maybe one day I'll be as good as some of these other students on the trip. But it was absolutely wonderful and so much fun having a new perspective and to get to be with all these people.
Well, thank you. And what did your parents say? What was their response to some of the photos of yours that they saw?
They loved it. They were all over it. They loved getting to hear what I had learned, and especially their businesses, basically, they plan hunting and fishing trips all over the world. They're kind of like a travel agent. And so it was really fun to me to get to come back and say, listen to what I've heard, listen to what their opinions are, both pro and anti, and they loved hearing it because obviously if you believe something, you need to be able to back it up. And so it was really cool for all of us to get to sit down and talk about it and, them hear my opinions and me hear their opinions and kind of bounce off each other. But they loved all of our photographs. They loved hearing about everyone on the trip and my constant, texts back to America while we were on there. They absolutely loved all of that and really enjoyed hearing all the different perspectives and the different stories that we got to write.
Well, they were great for us, and you were, just in having us just have everything logistically taken care of and not having to worry about that. As a journalist, you never have logistics taken care of. So to have that treatment was really unique and helpful. So thank you. All right, so let's switch to Ariel. Ariel, if you can talk about when you are on photo projects, whether they're here or across the world, there's a sense of having to gain access into people's lives, and you have to actually get people to trust you a bit, and then they give you access to share who they are and open up. Can you talk about maybe some of the people who you met and how you navigate that, how you do actually gain access to get to know somebody beyond, here's this person 10 feet away from me and I'm going to take a picture, to where you actually connect with someone?
Hi, y'all. My name is Ariel, and like Miss Mickey said, I have been on quite a few photo trips, but this one was quite different. I really didn't have no idea where I was going. The easiest people to work with on this trip, well, I say the children, they knew I was different, but since I looked like them, they weren't too afraid to approach me. Because sometimes I was called sister from Jamaica, sister from Brazil. They didn't believe I was from America. They was like, no, you're one of us. So that made them a little bit more comfortable. But like Miss Mickey said, you can't always shove a camera in somebody's face. Sometimes you have to put it down and just like listen, or pull out your notepad, something they're more comfortable with. And later on, after they're used to being around you, yeah, you can get that photo, and they'll be used to the camera by then, just to catch like that raw emotion. So this trip, it just helped me become more aware that how people respond to different things that I do. And what else did you ask me?
That's good. I was just asking how you were able to get people to give you access. So one, it could have just been your appearance, that people were like comfortable. But was there anything that you had to do in just sitting down, talking to people?
Yeah, sitting down, I was actually writing more than photographing than I'm used to on this trip. Like the guy Vusa I met, his parents were leaders, I would say, in the village that we were in. So I really was interested in him and how he went from a kid in the village into like being a safari guide. So that was really interesting. Like, I didn't have to photograph so much. It was just more of like listening. And then later on, we actually got to go to his house. So that was just like more to the story. You got to hear him talk, his mom, his dad. You actually got to see his mother's house. So little things like that, if you like listen to what they're talking, like other pieces will connect later on, then you can go back and photograph.
Thank you. So let's move to Faith. Faith, can you talk to us about what it's like to stay in a tent? What was it like when you say we stayed at a tented lodge?
Okay. Hi, I'm Faith. I'm Faith, and so basically, when I would decide to go to Africa, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I thought, like Lion King, that's all I had to go off of. And then so the third lodge we stayed in was a tinted lodge, and a lot of, I didn't know this, that at night it gets, and early in the morning, it's very, very, very cold. So staying in a tinted lodge that has no air conditioning, no heat, it's going to be very cold at night. So the lodges that we stayed in are pieces of heaven in the middle of Africa. I'm not even joking. One in John Gray. It's beautiful, and you're wondering like where these places came from, because they just pop up out of nowhere, and you're staying in literally 5-star luxury. But then when we stayed in the tinted lodge, not only you're worried that you're going to be cold, but then the staff and everybody, they're like, don't worry, we're going to bring you heaters for your bed. We're going to bring you warm water in the morning. We're going to, everything's taken care of because of how great the staff is. So literally, we had hot water brought to us early in the morning because it was so cold. But besides that, staying in a tinted lodge was not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Can you talk about Nahimba Lodge, and do you guys remember like our dinner time when we had a guest close by, and also just going from one place to the next, what that experience was like on the lodge property?
No. Okay. Is it working? No. Can y'all hear me? Okay. So staying in Nahimba was my favorite, and I think it was a lot of our favorites, right? And it was probably the best example where you have to like pinch yourself and be like, I'm in Africa and I'm eating with an elephant right now.
And also our escorts, how we needed to be escorted.
Yes, at the Tinted Lodge, at all lodges, we had to, when we wanted to go to and from our rooms at night and early in the morning, we had to have a guide escort us back and forth because of the danger of animals. So, I mean, when they told us that, it didn't really hit me. I was like, okay, but then when they escort you, they're carrying their shotgun and they're walking. So, I mean, it was very, very interesting, but it was the best time ever.
Great. So we're going to now jump to Alice. If you can talk about, Alice, the Imvelo lodges and their relationship to the community with respect to hiring.
We're all good.
You're good? Okay. So can you talk about Imvelo lodges and their relationship to the community and how they hire and train people?
Okay. So hi, my name is Alice. So Imvelo was the company that we went for our photo safari, and it's located in Wangi National Park. And so poaching is a really big problem, probably not as big as you think it is in the national park. And a lot of people think poaching is due to, people, they're selling rhino horns and it's all for the money and people are doing it so they can get their big bucks. But actually a lot of people who poach do it because they can't afford to feed their families. And so they hunt a lot of animals, like wildebeest, zebras, that kind of thing, specifically for meat to feed their families. And Imvelo, I think, is actually the only lodge in Zimbabwe, I know, but probably in all of Southern Africa, that when they catch the poachers, they'll sometimes actually hire them after they serve their stint in jail, because they know the land and they know the animals, and they were poaching because they needed the food, not to get extra money. And so that way they can hire them, they can afford to feed their families, and everything works out. And I interviewed a man named Japhet, and I can't pronounce his last name because there were some clicks in it, but he was the guy, and he had been caught poaching 3 times, and finally after the 3rd time, I think he spent 2 years in jail. They hired him, and he'd been working there for 2 or 3 years after that. And he said after working there, he could afford to send his son to high school and then to college after that. So it was really neat to see that, of course, here in America, if we see someone stealing from us, we're go to jail. You deserve it, and we're not going to give you a second chance. But over there, they're very supportive of keeping things in the community and making sure everyone is taken care of.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to Thomas. Last but not least, Thomas, you've covered a lot locally with respect to photography, photojournalism, and this was your first time in Africa. Can you talk about, from the way that you covered the stories, how it was different or the same?
Don't think there's much to add. Everybody's said a lot already. As far as covering, a story that really stuck out to me was covering the Nagamo primary school. And a lot of it was the same. You kind of go in with you step back, kind of watch for a second, try to get involved, see what's going on, figure out what's happening, and then kind of start making pictures. Go with the flow, go with what's looking good, find the people doing the fun things. Big difference here was, obviously, it's in a completely different setting, completely different understanding of everything, everything's different. Yeah, that too. Don't know, but.
So can you talk about when we first, when we were spending a day going to Ngamo Village, we were meeting children as they were walking to school, and they walk up to a 5K to school in the morning. It's cold. Some have shoes, some don't. But we were approaching the children and hearing their laughter, their singing, everyone their hearts melted. And everyone put their cameras down except for Thomas. So, can you tell me why you didn't put your camera down and what you were able to capture in that walk to school?
Everybody was having fun. There were good moments. Everybody was, I mean, it really showed the joy these children had of seeing everybody, of having friends walking with them to school. And that's some of the purest emotion, best photos, best chance to really show the emotion and the joy and the real interaction between the lodge and the school.
Great. So I'm going to show your multimedia from that.
This is Ngamo Primary School. We've got 300 pupils all together. It's from ECD to grade 7. So all the things that you are using, even if you can see the books, exercise books, some of the parents here, they can't afford to buy their kids an exercise book. They can't afford to buy. Now and again, in the safaris, we have donations. Those donations, we buy exercise books.
So our website is southernafrica.olemissinafrica.com. We will post that on social media so you have access to it. I'd like to thank Professor G for all his work and help with that. And also want to mention three students who were not able to make it. Jennifer's preparing for election coverage. She couldn't make it. Celine graduated, and Bailey is studying abroad in London. So they did great work, and their work is also on the website. So please check it out. We do have time for any questions that you have. Feel free to ask anyone here. If you have them, feel free to stand up or shout out. Question is, how long was the trip? 2 weeks.
But you have to think about travel time. It took us like 16 hours on a plane to get there, like connection and stuff. So really, I think we spent like 9 days actually there, and like they said, it was not enough time. Like I'm already planning my trip back whenever I graduate and have a little bit more money. But it was awesome. It was definitely worth it. So if y'all get to study abroad, study abroad.
Go ahead. Is there another trip to Zimbabwe? That would be a question that Dean Norton or Mitchell can answer. Oh, wonderful. You're in which department? Yes. Okay. When we've seen some great photos from that. Thank you. And we typically do a depth report every year, and that can be local in the state. Professor Rose, he leads them all the time, and our weekend reporting trips. And then for the international opportunities, those also happen. So as soon as we know more details of our next one, everyone will find out. The question is, was this a study abroad trip? And it was a study abroad trip, yes. Go ahead. When did the trip take place? Do you guys know the date specifically?
They have to
May 17th. May 17th to the 28th.
graduation.
Yep, May session.
So it's summer here, but it's the start of their winter there. So that's what Paige is talking about, like cold nights. Like you think, and I'm gonna be honest, I was really ignorant. I don't think Lion King was the only thing I had to go off of, but I never wanted to go to Africa. Like that was never something that crossed my mind. But I saw Zimbabwe. I love to travel. I was like, let me try it. And now, like I said, I want to go back. But it was interesting to experience. I think the ride into Nahimba, you saw the leaves changing colors because it was fall there. And I'm from Virginia, so that's a we're surrounded by trees, I guess. And so like that kind of reminded me of my home in Virginia. So it's kind of cool to see the connections.
That's like so true too, because a lot of times you had to remind yourself. I mean, yes, there's like elephants roaming around all the time, and like you see a giraffe sometimes, but like sometimes you'll just be riding on a safari car and you'll have to just like remember to be like, oh my gosh, I'm in Africa, because it's one of those things where it's so beautiful that I don't know, you just have to like pinch yourself sometimes and be like, I'm in Africa. Yes, like the leaves are changing colors. Like I could be in Virginia right now. You know what I'm saying? But it was.
Then you see that. So.
Yeah, and then you see like Victoria Falls. And you're like, yeah.
Any other questions? Yes. So it covered for some of the students it was 375 photojournalism. For other students it was advanced photojournalism, which is 403. I don't know our next class what it would be, but we try to make it so that you can get credit, and we just try to work with you on that. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you everyone involved and for being here as well.